Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and we have a huge problem in this country, but not what the mainstream media keep trying to distract us with. If there's one social ill which stands out above everything else, it is toxic masculinity. Weak men feeling left behind and lashing out. The government are laying the groundwork for their strategy on tackling violence against women and girls, and one aspect of this is to be education for boys. Boys are to be taught to respect girls and women in schools as part of the curriculum. These lessons will include being taught what healthy relationships are like and extend to challenging misogynistic behaviour as well. Along with the lessons, teachers will reportedly be given training on how to spot the signs of children being radicalised by people like Andrew Tate and intervene. All of this is long past its time. If we think about the major problems facing society, it's not a few people asking for asylum, it's not multiculturalism, it's not people with disabilities. I'm going to be talking more about the nonsense of these thick racists, in terms of what they're saying later today, if nothing else comes up. But the real threats to the stability of our society are the large groups of mostly men who are turning people against one another. The sorts of people who went on a violent rampage in the summer of 2024. Those are the people threatening our way of life. And there are a few circles overlapping on the Venn diagram of these people. Racism, poverty, poor education, misogyny. If we shrink those circles, we shrink the problems. Racism is the most difficult because that's like a tribalism trait. We evolved to be extremely tribal. I keep threatening to explain the science behind that one, but not today. The others can absolutely be tackled and relatively quickly. Tackling the cost of living will diminish the feeling of being exploited by others. And if you don't feel exploited by others, you can't so easily be persuaded that some of the most vulnerable people in society, like asylum seekers, trans people, or the disabled, are at fault. Better education equips people with critical thinking skills, which makes you less susceptible to disinformation. Doesn't make you immune, does make you resistant. But misogyny is a huge factor and absolutely needs serious state intervention to shrink that circle. And this isn't being implemented in isolation. It's part of Labour's strategy for halving violence against women and girls. However, as a former teacher, I do have a few cautionary notes. Obviously, there's nothing to criticise about this move in isolation, but we should remember the two massive blind spots that we may still have. The first is I've got experience of governments deciding that a soft skill should be taught in schools, but when there's no extra resources behind it. So it ends up being done very badly. Are the government just going to send a document round to schools saying, right, you need to do this now? Or are they going to properly fund training and materials to deliver these important lessons? I was reading a report in the Times on this, where it was talking about the fact that the reason this strategy has been delayed for so long, one of the things is wrangles over funding. Right. And I can almost guarantee one of that will have been the educational side of it. Are you going to fund this or just tell us to do it? 20 years of working in education has given me a bit of cynicism about how this might work in practice. The government must recognise it needs resourcing if they're serious. But the second blind spot is also one that could easily be covered, actually. Private schools do not follow the national curriculum. So this move will do nothing to make sure privately educated boys get lessons on respecting women. A lot of privately educated people already get an inflated sense of self-worth from their education, and some private schools have segregation, like the all-boys school Nigel Farage famously attended, which only makes the development of misogyny worse. My solution: private schools should be made to teach certain aspects of the curriculum. Anything considered essential universal learning for society should be universal teaching throughout the UK, including in private schools and ideally homeschooling where that's feasible. And the second part of the solution would be to make private schools subject to Ofsted inspections, at the very least for safeguarding purposes, and to check these things are being taught adequately. It is insane that private schools do not even get safeguarding visits from Ofsted when many private schools are basically child abuse farms. We often think of Tories as being psychologically deviant. You look at the callous attitudes of people like Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Kemi Badenoch, David Cameron and so on, and you conclude that because right-wing thinking is driven by, well, what's best for me, greed is good, rather than the collective, that it's being right-wing that hardens your hearts against common struggling people. But it's probably more likely the abuse they themselves were victims of at school, which damaged them and turned them into psychopaths in adulthood. Private schools need to be inspected. They need to be made to deliver these anti-misogyny lessons as well. After all, let's be honest, those who are privately educated are given a grappling hook launcher to fast track up the social hierarchy, right? That is the point of paying for private education. It fast tracks your child in society. That means that the average privately educated man has influence over more people, including women, in their working lives than a state-educated man. There should be a greater need for anti-misogyny training, not less. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood's been giving speeches today to announce other measures that her department will be taking, because obviously I've just been talking about Department of Education stuff. The Home Office is going to be taking the bulk of this anti-misogyny strategy, and apparently the full strategy is going to be published on Thursday. And she was arguing with Trevor Phillips this morning, who tried to take the freedom of speech line on defending young men who lionise people like Andrew Tate. But Mahmood said the government was not willing to just sit back and accept that violence against women and girls is a fact of life. And quite right. I will keep saying it myself. If there is conflict between someone's right to say what they think and another person's right to safety and dignity wins every time. And this isn't a new or radical concept. We've been taught this basic premise in Britain for generations. It's basically part of our culture, not just ours. When we were growing up, how many people out there are going to seriously say, you do not remember your mother saying to you, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all? The phrase was popularised by Bambi, but it goes way back. It's part of our culture. And the lesson is that words can hurt and should not be used as weapons. The very people arguing that freedom of speech is more important than freedom from harm are attacking our culture, therefore. It's a saying in a lot of countries. And so it could be argued that it's also a lesson rooted in basic humanity. But it has been taught in Britain for as long as anyone can remember. Those arguing against it are literally trashing one of the most recognisable and universal lessons that British mothers have taught their children since before the time they claim they want to go back to. You know, all those photos they post on social media of a load of white people in the street. Oh, why can't we go back to these times, they ask. Well, in that photo, son, are British women who taught their children to keep their mouths shut rather than say anything hurtful against others. But the real reason these men are posting these photos, oh, I can't go back to then. It's not because the people in the street were white, because they actually weren't, right? It's because that was the time when the men were the king of the households, right? When everything revolved around them, the nuclear family. The bloke went out and earned the crust. They had the power. They had the economic power over that household. That's what they want. And only weak men think like that. They don't like the competition of equality. That makes them weak. That's what the problem we've got now. Toxic masculinity is weak masculinity. And this idea that is developing amongst the far right in response that somehow the government are going to be attacking young lads for being young lads also needs shutting down. Misogyny and hate is taught, and respect can also be taught. The real debate in Britain should be, of these lessons, which one do we want our government making sure our children are learning? Let me know in the comments below. Please subscribe to the channel for more content. Click the bell notification icon so you know when new videos are coming out. Thanks for listening, and until next time, I'll see you later.